The townspeople said the brothers on the mountain were no longer men of God. The chapel bell rang at night, and each time it tolled, another boy vanished from the valley. No graves were ever dug, no bodies ever returned. Some whispered the monks were keeping something in a coffin beneath the altar, something that woke only when blood was spilled. So when a church scribe was sent up there in the winter of 1844, he thought he'd be copying records. Instead, he found the brothers feeding their father in the dark. If you want more stories the history books won't tell, make sure you're subscribed, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? The first sound was the bell. It rang through the Appalachian Valley with a slow, heavy toll, each strike echoing off the frozen cliffs. Snow clung to the pines, thick and wet, sagging their branches toward the ground. The wind carried the sound across the woods like a warning, steady and grim. A boy stumbled through the snow. His robe was torn, his chest heaving, bare feet leaving streaks of red behind him. He pressed a strip of cloth tight to his arm, but the blood still leaked through. Every step weakened him, yet he pushed forward, desperate to escape. Behind him came the voices, dozens of them rising together in low chant. The sound grew and fell like waves, words he could not understand but felt in his bones. Lanterns swung between the trees, glowing faintly through the storm. The robed figures carrying them did not run. They walked slowly, in perfect rhythm with the bell, as if they already knew the boy could not get far. He dared not look back. He knew those men. He had prayed with them, worked beside them, broken bread with them. They were the brothers of the mountain chapel. Now they were hunters, and he was the prey. The boy tripped on a buried root, crashing hard into the snow. Pain shot through his knee. He whimpered, forcing himself to crawl. His blood left a dark trail on the white ground. His breath came out in ragged bursts, fogging in the cold air. The chanting grew louder. The bell tolled again, slower, deeper. He staggered to his feet, using a tree for balance. Ahead, he saw the outline of the old logging road, faint beneath the snow. If he could reach it, maybe he could make it down to the valley town. Maybe someone would help him. He stumbled onto the road, his body swaying, each step weaker than the last. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he saw light far ahead. A lantern, a rider, someone who could save him. But when he blinked, it was gone. The boy collapsed again. His face struck the snow, his hands clawing at the ground. His whole body shook as he tried to rise, but his arms trembled too much to lift him. And then, silence. The chanting was gone. No voices, no footsteps, only the whistle of the wind. The boy froze. His breath came shallow and quick. His ears strained against the quiet, searching for any sound of pursuit. But the woods stood still. The trees, the road, the snow, all silent, empty, waiting. A faint hope rose in his chest. Maybe he had outrun them. Maybe God had spared him. Tears welled in his eyes. He pressed his forehead into the snow, whispering broken thanks. He lifted his head, smiling weakly through his pain. He was alive. He could keep going. He could. A hand gripped his shoulder. It was cold, strong. The fingers pressed into his bone like iron clamps. The boy gasped, twisting his head. A tall man stood over him, his beard stiff with frost, his eyes calm and steady. He held a lantern low, its glow casting long shadows across the boy's face. His lips shone wet and red, though he bore no wound. It was the abbot, the leader of the brothers, the man the boy once trusted more than anyone. The boy's throat locked, no sound escaping. His body stiffened under the weight of that hand. The abbot leaned close, his breath cold against the boy's cheek. "Do not run," he said softly. "You are chosen." The boy shook his head, tears streaking his frozen face. "Please," he whispered, "I don't want this. I just want to go home." The abbot lifted the lantern higher. All around them, the other brothers emerged from the trees. Their lanterns glowed like scattered stars, circling the road. Their faces were pale, their eyes downcast, their lips cracked. They stood still, silent, waiting. The abbot reached into his robe and drew out a small iron chalice. The rim was stained dark, its surface blackened by years of use. He tilted it forward. A thick drop spilled over the edge. It was not wine. The liquid glistened in the lantern light, darker than ink, thicker than syrup. When it struck the snow, it sizzled faintly, burning a tiny hole into the ice. The boy whimpered, thrashing weakly. Hands gripped his arms and legs, pulling him flat against the ground. The brothers pinned him down with ease, their faces calm, their grip unshakable. The abbot lowered the chalice. The boy turned his head, clamping his lips shut. He shook his head violently, trying to resist, but the brother's hands forced his jaw open. The iron rim touched his mouth. A single drop fell onto his tongue. It burned. The boy gagged, convulsing, his eyes wide. The taste was copper and fire, searing his throat as if it carried heat inside it. He tried to spit, but his body locked. His back arched, his limbs trembled. A low groan escaped him, choked and broken. The chanting began again, soft at first, then louder. The brothers swayed with the rhythm of his struggling. Their voices filled the woods, mixing with the steady toll of the bell. Their lanterns swung back and forth, casting shadows across the snow. The boy's eyes rolled back. His body stiffened once, then went limp. His chest rose and fell in short. Shallow gasps before stopping altogether. The chanting ceased. The abbot straightened, raising the chalice high. The brothers lowered their heads, murmuring prayers too faint to hear. The boy's body was lifted, carried gently between them as if he were a holy offering. They turned back toward the ridge, their lanterns swaying in unison, their steps slow and measured. The abbot led them, his voice steady, reciting words that were swallowed by the storm. Snow began to fall again, covering the trail of blood within minutes. The bell tolled once more, heavy and final. And the valley was silent. Jonathan Hale arrived in Ashford Valley at the break of day. His horse carried him slowly through the snow, hooves crunching on the frozen dirt road. The town was small, no more than a dozen cabins, a sawmill, and a chapel bell faintly visible in the distance above the ridge. Smoke drifted thin from chimneys. Doors stayed shut, windows covered, as though the people inside wished not to be seen. Hale kept his coat tight against the cold. He had traveled for weeks across mountains and rivers to reach this place. His task was simple: record the births, deaths, and land deeds of the valley, and gather the missing church records from the mountain brothers. The work was routine, but the journey was not. The town sat far from the nearest rail line. Few travelers ever came here. He tied his horse outside the general store. A wooden sign swung loosely on rusted nails, squeaking with each gust of wind. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with the smell of pine soap and dried meat. Behind the counter sat an older woman with gray hair tucked under a wool shawl. She looked up as Hale stepped in. Her eyes lingered on his face, sharp and suspicious. "You're not from here," she said flatly. "No, ma'am," Hale replied, removing his hat. "Jonathan Hale. I'm a scribe, sent by the diocese to record our chapel's accounts." At the word chapel, her knitting needles stilled. She placed them down, folding her hands in her lap. "You're going up the ridge?" "That's right." Hale gave a polite smile. "I'll be copying their ledgers, births, deaths, marriages. I hear they've kept to themselves for many years. This will bring their records up to date." Her face did not soften. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You shouldn't stay there after sundown. If they offer you a drink, don't take it. Promise me that." Hale blinked. "I beg your pardon?" She shook her head slowly. "The brothers. They are not as they once were. Too many children have gone missing. Too many graves never dug." Before Hale could ask more, the door opened. A tall man with a sack of coal stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. He glanced at Hale, then at the woman. "Mary, that's enough," the man said. "You'll scare him off with that nonsense." She lowered her gaze, picking up her knitting again, but her hands trembled. The man turned to Hale. "You're heading to the chapel, I hear. Do your work and leave it at that. Don't let gossip keep you from your duty." Hale gave a small nod. "Of course, I'll be on my way by tomorrow." But that night, as he wrote in his journal by candlelight, the woman's words echoed in his mind. "If they offer you a drink, don't take it." The next morning, Hale set out for the ridge. The trail was narrow, carved between frozen pines and cliffs of black stone. His horse struggled on the incline, its breath steaming in the cold air. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. No birds sang, no streams ran beneath the ice. The silence pressed down on him heavier than the snow. By midday, he reached the chapel. It stood against the mountainside, built of dark stone and rotting timber. The roof sagged beneath the weight of snow. The bell tower rose tall but crooked, its iron bell swaying gently though there was no wind. Hale dismounted, tying his horse to a post buried in frost. The wooden doors of the chapel creaked open, and a figure stepped out. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a long beard stiff from the cold. His robe was dark, his eyes calm, steady. "Welcome, traveler," the man said. His voice was deep, measured. "I am Abbot Elias. We have been expecting you." Hale frowned. "Expecting me?" The abbot smiled faintly. "News reaches us, even up here. Come inside. Warm yourself." Hale hesitated. The woman's warning echoed in his mind. Still, he nodded politely and followed the abbot through the doors. The chapel's interior smelled of smoke and damp stone. Candles flickered at the altar, their light dim. The pews were empty, the air colder than outside. Wooden crosses hung along the walls, but some leaned sideways, others upside down, nailed as if carelessly placed. The abbot led him forward. From the shadows, brothers emerged one by one, pale men in heavy robes, their faces drawn and tired. None spoke, none smiled. They stood in silence, watching Hale with eyes that did not blink often enough. The abbot gestured toward a small silver chalice on the altar. Its rim was black, as though scorched. "You have traveled far," Elias said. "Join us, drink, and be welcomed." Hale's throat tightened. He forced a smile. "Perhaps later. The records first, if I may. The work is what brought me here." The abbot's eyes lingered on him, too long, too still. Then he nodded. "As you wish. Follow me." He led Hale down a narrow hall, the stone walls damp, the air colder still. Their footsteps echoed softly. At the end stood a heavy iron door bound in rust. Deep scratches scarred the frame, like marks left by fingernails. The abbot drew a key from his robe. The lock groaned as it turned. He pulled the door open. Inside was not a library of scripture. It was a vault of ledgers, shelves stacked to the ceiling, each spine marked with years. Some stretched back further than thus. E-town itself. Hale stepped inside slowly, his breath clouded in the cold. He brushed dust from a spine and opened it. The pages were filled with names. Beside each name was a date, and beside each date, the same word written again and again. "Taken." Hale turned, his voice unsteady. "What kind of record is this?" The abbot's faint smile never changed. "These are the lives we have kept." The iron door swung shut behind them with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the stone hall, deep and final. Hale did not hear the lock turn, but he felt the weight of it all the same. Jonathan Hale stood in the vault, staring at the rows of ledgers stacked high along the walls. Each spine bore a year, some recent, others reaching back before the town of Ashford was even settled. He pulled one from the shelf, brushing away dust. The cover creaked as he opened it. Inside, the pages were filled with lists of names written in careful ink. But where he expected births and baptisms, there were only dates. No births, no marriages, only names and dates marked with the same word over and over. Taken. Dozens of pages, all the same. He turned to the abbot, his voice low. "What are these records?" Abbot Elias's expression remained calm. "They are the truth of this place, every life that has passed through our hands." Hale closed the ledger, unsettled. He replaced it on the shelf, choosing another. The same pattern. Dozens more names, taken. A chill crept along his spine. "You mean to say these are deaths?" Hale asked. The abbot tilted his head slightly. "Not deaths. A death is an ending. These are transformations. They are beginnings." Hale felt the cold of the room pressing closer. His hand tightened around his journal, the leather warm compared to the damp stone air. "I was sent here to record marriages and births," Hale said, his tone firm. "These books show neither. They're meaningless to the church." The abbot's eyes lingered on him, calm but steady, as though studying his every word. "The church does not understand what is kept here. They would not accept it. But you may come to see." Hale shook his head. "I'm here to write, nothing more." The abbot smiled faintly, as if he had heard that before. "Then write." He left Hale alone in the vault. The heavy iron door closed behind him, the echo deep in the stone. Hours passed. Hale worked by the light of a single candle, the ledgers spread out before him, each page stranger than the last. Some dated back 50 years, others nearly a century. All told the same story: names, dates, taken. The more he read, the more uneasy he felt. Some names were familiar from the valley town below, families still living, yet their ancestors' records ended here, with no graves, no births after. It was as if entire bloodlines had been cut short. At one point he found a name repeated twice, a boy listed as taken in 1819 and again in 1836. The same name, the same family. Hale frowned, confused. Was it error or something worse? His candle burned low. Shadows filled the corners of the vault, pressing close around him. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint drip of water from the stone ceiling. At last, Hale closed his journal. He needed air. He pushed the door open and stepped back into the hall. The corridor stretched, long and dark, lit only by a lantern set on the wall. The air smelled faintly of smoke and iron. From somewhere deeper in the chapel came a sound. A voice, low and steady, singing a wordless hymn. Hale followed the sound, drawn despite his better judgment. The corridor ended at another heavy door, this one wooden and bound with thick bands of rusted iron. Strange markings were carved into its surface, symbols Hale did not recognize, crosses bent into odd shapes, circles pierced with lines. The sound came from behind it, voices, not one, but many, rising together in chant. He reached for the handle, but it would not move. The door was locked. Footsteps echoed behind him. Hale spun. A novice stood at the end of the hall, a boy no older than 17, his robe hanging loose on his thin frame. His face was pale, his lips dry. He stared at Hale for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't be here," the boy whispered. Hale lowered his voice. "What's behind this door?" The novice glanced at it, then back at Hale. His eyes darted nervously, as if afraid someone might hear. "The forbidden chapel," he said at last. "We're told never to speak of it." Hale's throat tightened. "Why? What happens in there?" The boy stepped closer, his face pale in the lantern light. "At night, they gather. They say prayers not meant for God. And the coffin." His voice broke off. He glanced around again, shaking his head. "The coffin must be fed," he whispered. Before Hale could ask more, the novice turned and hurried back down the hall, vanishing into the shadows. Hale stared after him, his heart pounding. He looked back at the iron-bound door. The chanting grew louder, steady, unbroken. His hand hovered near the handle, but he forced himself to step away. Not yet. He needed to learn more before opening that door. That night, Hale was given a narrow bed in a cold stone cell. The straw mattress was thin, the blankets damp from the mountain air. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the hours crept by. The chapel was not silent. From somewhere beneath him, faint through the stone, came the sound of chanting. Low at first, then rising, dozens of voices moving as one. Hale pressed his ear to the wall, his breath shallow. The sound came from deep underground. Then he heard something else. A moan, weak, human. The sound of pain. It lasted only a moment before the chanting swallowed it. Hale pulled back from the wall, heart pounding. His hand shook as he reached for his journal. He lit a small candle and began to write. The chapel keeps more than records. The brothers gather at night in a locked chamber below the halls. Voices chant prayers not of Christ. I heard a coffin spoken of. By one novice. Tonight I heard it. Someone crying out, then silence. If this is true, the valley's missing may be here, not buried. Not lost, kept. The candle flickered, nearly gone. Hale closed his journal and lay back, though sleep would not come. The bell tolled once in the night, slow and heavy, though no hands should have been pulling its rope at that hour. And still, the chanting continued. By morning, the brothers gathered in the dining hall. A simple table stretched the length of the room, wooden bowls filled with thin broth. Hale sat among them, watching as they lowered their heads in silence. None spoke, none looked up. They moved together as if bound by the same thought. The abbot raised his hand. A brother stepped forward, carrying the silver chalice Hale had seen before. Its rim was dark, its surface stained. One by one, the monks drank. Their lips touched the iron rim, their throats swallowing deeply. When they pulled away, a faint trace of red clung to their mouths. The chalice was passed down the line. When it reached Hale, the room grew still. Every eye turned to him. His hand hovered near it, but he did not touch. The woman's warning in the town echoed in his mind. If they offer you a drink, don't take it. He forced a polite smile. My stomach is weak from travel. I'll eat plain food if it pleases you. The abbot's calm eyes fixed on him. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the abbot nodded. As you wish, he said. The chalice passed on, but Hale saw the looks exchanged between the brothers. Quiet glances, knowing and cold. He had marked himself different from them, and in a place like this, he wondered what price that difference would cost. The next 2 days passed in uneasy silence. Jonathan Hale spent his daylight hours in the vault, hunched over the ledgers, his candle burning low as he copied names and dates into his journal. The workshulum had have been dull, yet every page unsettled him more. He never found baptisms, marriages, or proper deaths. Just the word written over and over in the margins. Taken. Each time he closed a book, he felt as though he had brushed against something unholy. By night, he lay in his stone cell, listening to the chapel walls hum with faint voices. The chanting rose and fell in waves, never fully quiet. Sometimes, in the deepest hours, he thought he heard footsteps in the hall, though no one passed his door. The brothers kept to themselves. They spoke little, moving through their routines like shadows. Hale studied them when he could. Their skin was pale, stretched thin across their faces. Some bore dark stains on their lips, as if something had bled there and never been cleaned. He wrote each detail in his journal, though he wondered if anyone outside these mountains would ever believe it. On the morning of the 3rd day, Hale noticed something strange. At breakfast, only 12 brothers sat at the table. He had counted 15 the night before. He set his spoon down, watching quietly as the meal passed in silence. No one spoke of the missing 3. Their bowls were gone, their places empty, as if they had never existed. Afterward, when the others dispersed, Hale stopped one of the younger novices in the corridor. The boy was pale, his eyes heavy with sleeplessness. "Where are the others?" Hale asked softly. "I counted 15. Now there are 12. The novice froze, his lips parting slightly. He glanced up and down the corridor, then leaned close. "They've been called," he whispered. "Called where?" The boy shook his head quickly. His hands trembled as he gripped his robe. "Don't ask. You'll see soon enough." Then he hurried away, disappearing into the shadows before Hale could press him further. The words echoed in Hale's mind all day. Called. Called where? Called to what? That night, the chanting was louder. Hale rose from his bed, pressing his ear to the wall. The sound was clearer now, dozens of voices moving as one, echoing from somewhere deep beneath the chapel. His skin prickled as he heard a low moan buried within the hymn. He lit his candle and opened his journal. His hand shook as he wrote. 3 missing. The novices say they have been called. Chanting below grows louder each night. I fear the forbidden chapel holds what the abbot does not wish me to see. If the valley's missing children are not buried, they are here. Alive or not, I cannot yet say. The candle guttered. He shut his book and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Sleep never came. The next morning, Hale left his work early and walked the corridors. He followed them quietly, memorizing their turns. Some ended at locked doors, others twisted into stairways that led downward before ending in blank stone walls. Everywhere he turned, he saw the same carvings scratched into wood and stone. Symbols of circles, crooked crosses, lines crossing over themselves. The markings looked less like scripture and more like warnings. As he passed a narrow stairwell, he heard a faint sound. Not chanting this time, but weeping. He followed it downward, each step creaking under his boots. The stair ended at a small wooden door. The sound came clearer now, a weak voice crying softly. Hale pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, little more than a storage cell. A single boy sat on the floor, his knees pulled to his chest. He wore the robe of a novice, though it hung loose on his frame. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. When he saw Hale, he flinched back, pressing against the wall. "It's all right," Hale said softly. He kept his voice calm. "I'm not here to harm you. Why are you down here?" The boy shook his head, whispering, "They're coming tonight. I don't want it. I don't want to go." "Go where?" Hale pressed. The boy's lips trembled. He lowered his head, whispering so faintly Hale had to lean in. "The coffin," he said. "They feed it. They'll feed me next." Hale's blood ran cold. "What coffin?" The boy shut his eyes, rocking back and forth, refusing to answer. His thin shoulders shook as he wept. Hale wanted to ask more, but footsteps echoed above, heavy, steady, drawing closer. He quickly backed out of the cell, pulling the door shut. He hurried back up the stairs, heart pounding. That night, Hale did not try to sleep. He sat in the dark, listening. The chanting began again, louder than ever. The bell tolled once, then fell silent. And then he heard it, the scrape of wood, the groan of heavy hinges. Somewhere below, a door was opening. Lantern light flickered faint through the cracks in the floorboards. Shadows moved below, dozens of them, swaying with the chant. Hale crept to the hall, his bare feet silent on the stone. He followed the light, keeping to the shadows, until he reached the iron-bound door he had seen before. The forbidden chapel. This time, the door stood slightly ajar. He leaned close, his eye to the gap. What he saw froze him in place. The brothers knelt in a circle, their heads bowed. In the center of the chamber stood an altar of rough stone, and upon it lay a coffin, its lid open. Inside, pale as marble, was a figure, its eyes shut, its lips trembling faintly, as though in restless sleep. One of the missing brothers stood at the altar. His face was calm, his hands steady. The abbot placed a knife against his wrist. With one swift motion, he opened a vein. The brother did not cry out. He simply leaned forward, pressing his bleeding arm into the coffin. The lips inside stirred. They parted, dark red tongue flicking weakly, then fastening to the wound. The figure drank. The brother swayed, his body trembling as blood drained from him. The chanting grew louder, faster, shaking the chamber. Hale stumbled back from the door, his chest heaving, bile rising in his throat. He pressed a hand to his mouth, forcing himself not to cry "Ute." He turned and hurried back through the corridor, every nerve in his body screaming. Now he understood what taken meant. It did not mean buried. It meant fed. Morning came gray and heavy. Snow fell hard against the chapel roof, rattling the shutters. Jonathan Hale sat on the edge of his straw mattress, his body stiff, his mind restless. He had not slept. All night, the sight replayed in his head. The coffin, the pale lips moving, the monk's blood dripping into the open mouth, the word in the ledgers, taken. He pressed his hands to his face. Every instinct told him to leave, to ride down the mountain and never return. But the horse was tied outside under the brothers' watch, and even if he managed to mount it unseen, the trail was narrow and steep. They would catch him before he made it halfway. For now, he had no choice but to remain. The bell rang. The sound pulled him from his cell into the dining hall. The brothers sat in their usual silence, hands folded, their pale faces calm. The abbot stood at the head of the table, his robe darker than the rest, his eyes sharp and steady. Hale took his place among them, his heart pounding. Wooden bowls were set before each man, filled with the same thin broth as every morning. Stale bread was passed down the line. Hale dipped his bread in the broth, forcing himself to chew, though the taste turned sour in his mouth. Then the chalice was brought out, a silver vessel, darkened at the rim, its surface stained from years of use. A young novice carried it carefully, his hands trembling as he set it before the abbot. Abbot Elias lifted the chalice high. "My brothers," he said in his slow, measured tone, "we give thanks for the gift that sustains us. May it keep us bound as one body, one voice." The monks bowed their heads. The chalice was passed down the line. One by one, the brothers lifted it to their lips and drank. Hale watched. Ed closely. He saw the faint trace of red left behind on their mouths. Not wine, not broth, blood. The chalice crept closer, passed from pale hands to pale hands, until it rested before him. Every eye in the hall turned to him. Hale felt the weight of their stares pressing on his skin. His heart thundered. His throat dry. He thought of the woman in town. "If they offer you a drink, don't take it." He forced a polite smile. "My stomach is weak from the road," he said softly. "If it pleases you, I'll eat plain food until I'm well." Silence. The abbot's eyes fixed on him, calm, unmoving. The air grew heavy. Hale's fingers tightened around the wooden table. The silence stretched so long he feared he had condemned himself. Then, at last, the abbot nodded. "As you wish," he said. The chalice was passed along, but the stares did not leave Hale. He felt them even as the bowls were cleared, even as the brothers filed silently out of the hall. He remained seated, his breath shallow, until only the abbot and one novice remained. The abbot stepped closer, resting a hand on Hale's shoulder. His grip was firm, cold. "You must not refuse forever," Elias said quietly. "The gift waits for all who come here. You cannot stay apart from it." Hale swallowed hard. "I came only to copy your records. Nothing more." The abbot's hand lingered a moment, then released. His calm smile returned. "Copy then. Write what you see. But know this, no page leaves this mountain unless we allow it." He turned and walked away, the novice following close behind. Hale sat frozen, his chest heavy, his hands shaking. Later that day, Hale returned to the vault. His candle flickered weakly against the shelves of ledgers. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, yet he forced himself to keep writing. The word "taken" appeared again and again, always marked in the same careful hand. He found whole families listed across decades, their names ending without explanation. In one book, the margin bore a note written smaller than the rest. "Brought below." The words chilled him more than the cold stone air. As he worked, footsteps approached. Hale blew out his candle and pressed himself against the wall. The vault door creaked open. Two novices entered, carrying a heavy wooden box between them. Their faces were pale, their lips moving silently in prayer. They set the box on the floor and pried it open with iron tools. Hale peered through the shadows. Inside the box were glass jars, each filled with dark liquid. The novices lifted them carefully, one by one, and placed them onto the shelves beside the ledgers. The candlelight caught the glass. The liquid inside was thick, red, blood. Hale's stomach twisted. The novices whispered to each other. "For the chalice," one said. "Keep it filled." The other nodded, setting the last jar in place. They closed the box, lifted it again, and carried it out. The vault door shut behind them. Hale pressed a hand to his mouth, his chest heaving. He waited long minutes before relighting his candle. He looked at the jars gleaming on the shelves, nestled among the ledgers of names. The gift, the abbot had called it, the gift that sustained them. Hale realized now the chalice never emptied. It was kept full by jars, and those jars were filled by the missing. That night, Hale lay awake again. The chanting returned, louder than before, echoing up from beneath the chapel. He thought of the novice he had found in the storage cell, weeping that he would be fed to the coffin. He thought of the 3 missing brothers. He thought of the pale figure in the box, lips twitching as it drank. And he thought of the chalice, passed down the line, waiting for him to drink. Sleep never came. He stared into the dark until the bell rang again, slow and heavy, shaking the mountain. The brothers gathered below. The chanting swelled, and Hale knew with rising dread that the day would soon come when refusal would no longer be possible. The storm had not eased. For 3 days, the mountains were buried in snow, cutting the chapel off from the town below. The trail vanished under drifts taller than a man. The brothers carried on with their routines, unaffected, as if they had expected the storm. Jonathan Hale, however, felt trapped. Each morning he rose, walked the same stone halls, and copied the same terrible ledgers by candlelight. Each night he returned to his cell, listening to the endless chanting from below. He had begun to lose track of time, his body stiff from cold and hunger, his mind clouded by lack of sleep. But something kept him working. Some pulled toward the books, toward the truth he could not yet see. It was during one of these long hours that he noticed the locked cabinet. The vault was lined with shelves, but in the far corner stood a tall iron-bound case, its doors chained shut with heavy locks. Dust covered its surface, undisturbed. Hale had not seen the abbot or any brother approach it. The sight of it drew him like a flame. He worked through the day, waiting for his chance. Finally, when footsteps faded down the hall and silence returned, Hale rose from his stool. He carried his candle across the vault, the flame trembling in his hand, and crouched before the cabinet. The locks were thick, rusted with age. No keys hung nearby. He pulled at them, but they did not budge. He searched the room, running his fingers along the stone walls, the shelves, the table. Nothing. At last, he reached into his satchel and withdrew the small iron tool he used to mend his quills, narrow, sharp at the end, not a key, but perhaps enough. He worked in silence, his breath shallow. The candle guttered as he twisted the metal. Once, twice, the lock clicked faintly, then again, another click. The chain loosened, the cabinet doors creaked open. Inside lay more ledgers, but these were different. The leather was older, cracked and curling at the edges. Some covers bore strange symbols burned into them, the same markings Hale had seen carved into the chapel walls. Others were stained dark, as though something had spilled across them long ago. Hale set one on the table, brushing dust from the cover. He opened it carefully. The first page bore a year, 1762. His eyes widened. This was before Ashford had even been settled, before the chapel was built. He turned the pages slowly. The same pattern appeared. Names, dates, the word taken. But here, the names were not from the valley. They were from towns far away. Pennsylvania, Virginia, even across the sea. Whole families listed, all ending the same way. Hale's stomach turned. He set aside the book and opened another. This one dated 1798. The handwriting was different, neater, more deliberate. Again, names filled the pages, and again, taken. Near the middle, however, he froze. One entry stood out. Beside a name, written smaller than the rest, was a single note. Recorder, arrived to copy accounts, kept. Hale's blood ran cold. He turned more pages. More notes appeared. Clerk from Richmond. Surveyor from Charleston. All marked the same. Kept. His hands shook as he closed the ledger. He set it aside and opened another, dated 1813. His breath caught when he read the margin. Jonathan Pierce, recorder, taken. Another man, another recorder like him, sent for the same work. His name written and ended here. Hale dropped the book. The sound echoed in the vault, too loud, too final. He pressed his hands to his face, his chest tightening. He understood now. He had not been sent here by chance. He had been sent because others before him had come, and none had returned. The church had not asked him to copy the records. They had sent him to vanish into them. The iron door creaked. Hale's head snapped up. He hurried to shove the books back into the cabinet, his hands fumbling. The chain rattled as he tried to pull it across the doors again. The candle guttered. Red. The abbot stepped inside. His tall frame filled the doorway, his face calm as always. His eyes drifted toward the cabinet, then to Hale. "You've been busy," Elias said softly. Hale forced his voice steady. "I was making an inventory. Your records are vast. The diocese will be impressed." The abbot stepped closer. His boots echoed on the stone floor. "These records are not for the diocese," he said, his eyes fixed on Hale, unblinking. "They are for us. They are what keep us bound." Hale swallowed hard. His hand tightened on the edge of the table. Elias looked down at the open ledger, at the names still visible on the page. His faint smile deepened. "You see, then," he said. "Others have come before you. All found their place." Hale forced himself to meet his gaze. "I am not like them." The abbot leaned closer, his cold breath brushing Hale's cheek. "Not yet," he whispered. He straightened, taking the candle from the table. The flame lit his face in sharp lines. "Close the cabinet," he said, "and do not open it again." Hale obeyed, his hands trembling as he pushed the doors shut. The chain clattered loosely around the handles, though the locks no longer held. The abbot held the candle high, casting long shadows across the vault. "You will see more soon," Elias said. "It is better to accept than to fight. We do not destroy. We keep. We transform. That is why we remain when all others fade." He turned and left, the iron door closing heavily behind him. Hale stood in the darkness, his breath ragged. The image of the ledger burned into his mind. Recorder, taken. The words would not leave him. That night, Hale did not try to write. He sat in the dark, listening to the chanting below, his body stiff, his mind racing. He thought of the novices, pale and trembling. He thought of the jars of blood. He thought of the coffin, the lips stirring as they fed it, and he thought of his own name, written one day in those ledgers, ending with the same word as all the rest. Taken. The thought gnawed at him until the bell rung again, heavy and final. Somewhere below, a door opened, the chanting swelled, and Hale knew his time was running out. Jonathan Hale had learned to fear the sound of the bell. Each toll felt heavier now, shaking his bones as much as the stone walls. By day it summoned silence, meals, and empty prayer. By night it called something worse. It marked the hour when voices rose from beneath the chapel, echoing through the floor, low and endless. That evening the bell rang louder than before. Hale lay in his cell, stiff on the straw mattress. His candle had burned out, leaving only darkness and the faint glow of lanterns from the hall. He told himself to stay still, to shut his eyes, to let the night pass. But he couldn't, not after what he had seen, not after the ledgers. The chanting grew louder, rolling like waves. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the sound seemed to come from inside his head. Dozens of voices, steady, rising and falling in a rhythm that quickened his heartbeat. Then he heard the scrape of hinges, a heavy door groaning open somewhere below, the sound of wood dragging against stone. They were gathering. Hale could not stop himself. He rose, his legs weak, his breath shallow. He stepped quietly into the hall, careful not to let his boots sound against the stone. The air was cold, heavy with smoke and something sour that burned his nose. He followed the glow of lanterns down the corridor, past the locked doors and scratched walls, until he reached the iron-bound entrance to the forbidden chapel. Tonight, it stood open. The chanting thundered now. Hale crouched low, peering into the chamber. It was larger than he had imagined, carved deep into the mountain. The walls were lined with candles that dripped wax onto piles of bones, stacked like firewood. At the center stood a rough stone altar, blackened with stains, and upon the altar lay the coffin. Its lid was open. Inside lay the same pale figure Hale had glimpsed before. Its skin was white as marble, its lips faintly twitching, its eyes closed as if in restless sleep. The brothers knelt in a circle around the altar, their robes spread across the stone floor. At the head stood Abbot Elias, his arms raised high, his voice carrying over the rest. "My brothers," he said, his voice deep and steady, "the hunger must be met. The gift must be sustained. Tonight, the blood binds us again." One of the missing brothers stepped forward. His face was calm, almost serene. He rolled up his sleeve and extended his arm over the coffin. The abbot drew a knife from his robe, its blade long and black with age. Without hesitation, he cut the brother's wrist. Blood spilled onto the figure's lips. The pale mouth stirred. At first it was only a twitch, then the lips parted. A tongue, dark and thin, flicked weakly at the blood. The figure's throat moved as it swallowed. Its eyes fluttered behind closed lids. The chanting grew louder. The brother swayed, but did not resist. His face remained calm, his body trembling only as the blood drained from him. The abbot steadied him, holding his wrist firm until the figure inside the coffin latched on. The sound turned Hale's stomach. A wet, slow pulling, lips drawing at flesh. The brother gasped softly, his knees buckling. Still he made no cry. The abbot's voice rose. By this offering we remain. By this hunger we are kept. By this blood we are bound. The figure's chest began to rise and fall. Its pale skin flushed faintly, as if warmth were seeping back into it. Its fingers twitched against the coffin's edge. Hale's hand gripped the doorframe, his breath shallow, his body trembling. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but his legs would not move. Another brother stepped forward, pulling back his sleeve. The abbot released the first, who collapsed weakly into the arms of the others. The second pressed his wrist to the coffin's mouth. The figure drank greedily now, its lips clamped tight, its throat moving teetily. Its eyelids flickered, and for a moment Hale thought he saw them part. Two pale eyes rolled open, cloudy but alive. They fixed on nothing at first, then slowly turned toward the abbot. The chanting reached a fevered pitch. The monks swayed, their voices deep and wild, echoing off the stone until it felt like the whole mountain was alive. The abbot leaned close to the figure. His voice was soft now, almost tender. "Feed, Father, feed and rise again." The figure stirred, lifting its head slightly from the coffin. The sound of its drinking grew stronger, deeper. Hale stumbled back, his hand slipping on the stone. The door creaked under his weight. Dozens of heads snapped toward him. The chanting stopped, the abbot's calm eyes fixed on Hale. "Bring him," Elias said. The brothers rose as one, their pale faces turned toward the outsider. Their footsteps echoed as they advanced, steady and unhurried, as though certain he could not escape. Hale spun, his heart pounding, and fled down the corridor. His candle sputtered out, leaving him in darkness, but still he ran. His boots slammed against the stone, his breath ragged, the sound of footsteps chasing him close behind. He turned corner after corner, desperate for the stairs that would lead him back to his cell, back to the surface. His hand scraped the walls, guiding him through the dark, but the voices returned, chanting again, rising behind him like a tide. The sound followed him through the halls. The brothers were coming. Jonathan Hale ran blind through the stone corridors, his hands scraping the walls for balance. His candle was gone. His boots slipped on patches of ice, but fear drove him forward. Behind him came the sound of pursuit, robes brushing against stone, footsteps in perfect rhythm, and the voices. Low, steady chanting that did not quicken though they chased him. Hale stumbled up a narrow stairwell, his breath sharp in his chest. He pushed open a wooden door and spilled into the main hall of the chapel. Moonlight leaked faint through the high windows, cold and pale. The pews stretched out in silence, shadows long across the floor. He ran for the doors, but they were already closed. A figure stood before them. The abbot, his tall frame blocked the exit, his beard rimmed with frost, his eyes calm and unblinking. He raised one hand, and the chanting behind Hale ceased. "You have seen what was meant to be hidden," Elias said, his voice low but steady. "Now you must choose, to remain apart, or to be bound." Hale backed toward the pews, his chest heaving. "I came only to write," he said, his voice trembling, "to copy your records, nothing more." The abbot stepped closer, his boots echoing against the stone. "The records are more than words, Jonathan. They are blood, they are life, and you have placed yourself among them." The brothers emerged from the stairwell, their lanterns glowing faint. They spread across the hall, circling Hale in silence. Their pale faces watched him, their eyes glinting in the weak moonlight. Hale's heart hammered. He turned toward the side aisle, searching for escape, but the monks closed in. Cold hands seized his arms, his shoulders, his wrists. He struggled, thrashing, but their grip was iron. The abbot nodded once. "Bring him." They dragged Hale down the center of the chapel, past the altar, back toward the iron door. He kicked against the stone, his voice breaking. "Let me go. I want no part of this." The abbot walked ahead, leading them calmly, his lantern swinging. "You cannot escape what has been written," he said. "You are here because it was meant. You are the next line in the ledger." They pulled Hale through the open door into the forbidden chapel. The candles still burned along the walls. The coffin still lay open upon the altar. The pale figure inside stirred faintly, lips twitching, throat moving as if hungering. The monks forced Hale to his knees before it. His arms were stretched wide, held firm by their hands. His chest heaved, sweat cold on his skin. The abbot stood over him, the black knife glinting in the candlelight. Do not resist. The more you fight, the more it consumes. If you yield, you may endure. Hale shook his head violently. I won't be part of this. The abbot lowered the blade, but instead of cutting Hale, he pressed the flat of it against his chest. The cold metal burned against his skin, though no wound opened. The abbot's voice deepened. The mark is given, Elias said. The vein will carry it. Hale gasped, his skin seared with pain, though the blade did not pierce him. A black vein spread outward from the point, crawling like ink beneath his flesh. He screamed, twisting against the hands that held him, but the monks did not relent. When the pain eased, he collapsed forward, gasping. His skin felt cold, his body weak. He looked down at his chest, at the black line still visible just below the skin. The abbot raised the chalice. You must drink, Elias said. Only then will you belong. Only then will you live. Hale's stomach churned as the chalice was lowered before his lips. He turned his head away, his mouth clamped shut. The monks tightened their grip. One forced his jaw open. The rim of the chalice touched his lips. He smelled it before he tasted it. Iron, salt, rot. A single drop fell onto his tongue. It burned like fire, searing his throat, spreading through his veins. He gagged, choking, trying to spit, but the hands held him firm. His vision blurred. His chest tightened. The coffin stirred. The figure inside shifted, its eyes fluttering open. Pale and clouded, they rolled toward Hale. Its lips parted, a weak hiss escaping. The abbot's voice thundered, Father, he is given to you. The monks lifted Hale, dragging him forward, his feet scraping against the stone. He struggled, kicking, thrashing, but his strength failed him. They pressed his arm to the coffin's edge. The figure inside reached up with trembling hands. Its grip was cold, stronger than Hale expected. Its lips pressed to his wrist. Hale screamed as the mouth latched on. The pull was slow at first, then deeper, stronger. His blood drained, his vision dimming. His body trembled, his voice breaking into sobs. The abbot's voice rose with the chant. By this blood he is bound, by this gift he is kept. The figure's pale face flushed faintly with color. Its lips moved greedily, its throat swallowing steadily. Hale's head swam, his chest hollow. The monks swayed, their voices filling the chamber. Hale's knees buckled, his strength ebbed. Darkness pressed at the edges of his sight. Just before he lost consciousness, the figure released him. His arm fell limp, blood dripping onto the stone. The monks let him collapse. The abbot knelt beside him, placing a cold hand on his chest. Hale's body trembled with each shallow breath. The black vein across his skin spread further, winding up his arm and across his neck. You are ours now, Elias whispered. You will endure. You will remain. The chanting slowed. The coffin fell still once more. Its occupant sated. Hale lay weak on the cold stone floor, his body trembling, his mind clouded. He tried to move, but his limbs refused him. His last thought before the darkness took him was of the ledger, his name waiting to be written, and the word that would follow. Taken. Jonathan Hale woke on the cold stone floor of his cell. The straw mattress was gone. His candle was gone. Only the bare walls remained, slick with damp, pressing close around him. He tried to sit up, but his arms trembled. His body felt drained, hollow, as though the marrow had been pulled from his bones. Memory returned in fragments. The chalice at his lips, the black vein burning across his chest, the coffin's pale figure latching onto his wrist. His stomach twisted at the thought, yet part of him felt strangely calm, as if his fear had dulled. He looked down at his arm. The skin was pale, nearly translucent. Dark veins spread beneath the surface, crawling upward toward his shoulder. They pulsed faintly with each slow heartbeat. He pressed his sleeve down, unable to bear the sight. His throat was dry, terribly dry. He licked his lips, but the taste was wrong. His mouth felt coated with iron, bitter and sharp. He craved water, yet when the novices brought a wooden cup to his door, he gagged on it. The liquid tasted like ash. Days blurred together. Hale could not tell how much time passed. The monks did not speak to him, only left food and water he could not bear to swallow. His body grew weaker, yet one thought began to gnaw at him, growing louder with each passing hour. Hunger. It was not hunger for bread or broth. It was deeper, twisting in his gut, burning in his throat. Each time a novice passed, Hale caught himself staring at the boy's hands, at the pale skin where veins pulsed faintly. He would shut his eyes, shoving the thought away, but it always returned. The ledger's word haunted him. Taken. He was becoming one of them. On the fourth night, he heard a soft voice outside his door. Jonathan. He pushed himself weakly to his feet, pressing against the cold stone. Through the narrow gap, he saw the young novice he had spoken to before, the one who had wept in the storage cell. His eyes were wide, his lips trembling. "They will call you again," the boy whispered. "The abbot says you are chosen. You will drink next time, not give." Hale's voice cracked. "I don't want this. Help me." The novice shook his head quickly. "I can't. None of us can. Once you're marked, there is no leaving." Hale pressed his hand to the gap. "Why do you stay then? Why not run?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Because even if I ran, I'd still hear them. The hunger follows you. It doesn't let go." He glanced over his shoulder, then whispered quickly, "If you want to resist, you must starve it. Don't take the chalice. Don't feed. If you do, you'll never come back." Before Hale could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. The novice flinched and slipped away, vanishing into the shadows. The silence that followed pressed on Hale like a weight. He staggered back to the corner of the cell, his body trembling, his throat burning with thirst. "Starve it," the boy had said, but how long could he resist before it consumed him from within? The next morning, Hale was taken from his cell. Two brothers gripped his arms, their hands cold and firm. He tried to pull free, but his strength was gone. They led him into the dining hall once more, where the long table was already set. The abbot sat at the head, his calm eyes fixed on Hale as he was forced into a chair. "You grow weaker," Elias said softly. "That is the hunger. Do not fear it. Accept it, and it will keep you." A bowl of broth was set before Hale. He pushed it away. His stomach turned at the smell. The chalice was carried in. The novice holding it trembled, his eyes fixed on the floor. He set it before Hale, then stepped back quickly, as though afraid to be near. The abbot gestured. "Drink." Hale stared at the vessel. The rim was blackened, the liquid inside dark and thick. His throat burned, his chest ached. He clenched his jaw, forcing his voice out. "No." The hall fell silent. Dozens of pale faces turned toward him. The abbot did not move. His eyes remained calm, steady. "If you refuse, the hunger will tear you apart. You will beg for it soon." Hale gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "I will not become what you are." A faint smile touched Elias's lips. "You already are." The chalice was lifted away. The brothers bowed their heads in silence, their lips twitching faintly as though smiling. Hale felt their eyes on him even after the hall emptied. That night, the hunger grew unbearable. He lay on the cold floor, his body twisting, his throat burning like fire. His skin itched where the black veins spread, crawling now across his shoulder and down his chest. His stomach felt hollow, gnawing at itself. When footsteps passed in the hall, he pressed against the door, his mouth open, his breath ragged. The faint pulse of the novice carrying a lantern filled his ears. He gripped the bars, his teeth bared, fighting the urge to cry out. He pulled back only when the boy was gone, shame and horror flooding him. He was losing himself. On the seventh day, the abbot came to him. Elias entered the cell alone, carrying no lantern, yet his presence filled the room like light. He crouched before Hale, studying his pale face, his trembling hands. "You feel it now," Elias said softly. "The gift, it burns, but it is not death, it is life. You only fear because you cling to what you were. Let it go, and you will never fear again." Hale forced a whisper. "You call this life? Feeding a coffin? Drinking blood?" The abbot tilted his head slightly. "Do you think the world beyond these mountains is better?" Out there, men feed on each other just the same. Here, we do not waste. We keep. We endure. He reached out, gripping Hale's chin, tilting his face upward. You will see, Jonathan. Whether you yield or not, the hunger will claim you. He released him, rising to his feet. When you are ready, the chalice will be waiting. The door closed behind him, leaving Hale in silence. Hale pressed his forehead to the stone floor, his body shaking. His chest burned, his throat raw, his veins alive with something not his own. The hunger was not fading. It was growing. The storm broke at last. The wind fell quiet. The clouds pulled back from the ridge. By afternoon, the sky was a flat, pale gray, and the trail to the valley showed under the snow like a scar across the mountain.